Hey guys, welcome to the Rags and Riches for A New Hope. This is I'm Sean Yu, your host at Card Kingdom, joined by Zach Onimus.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. We got some exciting Pauper action today, and today we have 50 players gathered here in Seattle, Washington, Ballard neighborhood to battle some Pauper. Now, you've been a big fan of playing Pauper in the past. You're joining us here in the booth. What do you think of this format?
You know, I really love this format. I think it's very skill intensive. It rewards practice and recognizing play patterns. It plays out a lot like Legacy in terms of like how fast a lot of the game and card interactions play out. But it kind of lacks a lot of the power cards like Force of Will, Sneak Attack, Emrakul, things like that. So a lot of the games end up being a lot more interactive. I think sometimes when I look at Pauper, I think this is kind of what Wizards has sort of envisioned for Modern, where you have these incredibly powerful decks and strategies, but they're sort of held in check by dazes and counterspell. Yeah.
I agree. For those uninitiated, since Pauper is not something you commonly see on stream, Pauper is an eternal format in which any card which has been printed as a common, either in paper or online, is legal, save for about a dozen cards on the ban list. So a lot of people think that rarity correlates with power level, but that's actually not the case.
Yeah, a lot of incredibly powerful cards are printed at common. So there's Lightning Bolt, there's Brainstorm, Counterspell, Gurmag Angler, Delver of Secrets.
That's a lot.
There's some powerhouses in this format.
That is like a hit list of some of the most powerful cards in Legacy. Interestingly, speaking of Legacy, on Monday we had a Legacy tournament, and in between we streamed sometimes Vintage and sometimes Pauper for fun. And we got to see some Brainstorms, Ponders, Preordains, Gushes. Only in Pauper can you play 4 copies of each of those. You can't do that in Legacy, you can't do that in Vintage.
Yep.
So clearly the power level doesn't necessarily correlate with rarity, and you got some really strong decks in Pauper.
Yeah.
Well, we got a nice feature match for you here today. Round 1, we got our previous finalist, Aleko Pors, who took second place at the Rags and Riches 3. He was on Freed from the Real combo last time. Today he's playing Mono Blue Delver.
Mm-hmm. And this deck is very, very powerful, and it experienced some recent bannings. They took out Cloud of Fairies, so that was the free creature that came into play and untapped 2 lands, which basically kind of gave you a free enabler for Ninja of Deep Secrets, and also for Spell Stutter Sprite. It lets you counter 2 mana spells essentially for free. So it lost a little bit of power. A lot of the decks are playing Fairy Miscreant now, which is the 1 mana 1/1 in the most recent core set. Mm-hmm. And it lets you draw a card if you have another Fairy Miscreant when it comes into play.
Yeah. And then on the right we have Jason Schumacher. He's on Blue-Red Cyclops.
Yeah, it looks like we actually have the names reversed. But yeah, Blue-Red Cyclops. There's only 12 creatures in this deck. They're Delver of Secrets, Kiln Fiend, and Nivix Cyclops. And really, there's just 8 creatures that really matter in this matchup, and that's Kiln Fiend and Nivix Cyclops. And both of those cards allow you, they pump themselves, so Kiln Fiend gets +3/+0, and Nivix Cyclops also gets +3/+0 whenever you play an instant or sorcery. And then they have ways of killing you after casting like Temur Battle Rage. They can cast 2 spells in Temur Battle Rage and do 20 points of damage to you with First Strike and Double Strike and Trample.
Yeah. So you see these Nivix Cyclops and Kiln Fiend, they kind of resemble the Prowess decks that actually see play in all formats ranging from Standard to even Legacy. I think even Vintage, in fact, Seeker of the Way sees play in Vintage. So, but this is a deck very low to the ground, tries to get damage in really quickly. Aleko won the Dyro, and looks like he led off of turn 1 Delver, and Jason followed from Taxian Probe into Basic Mountain. That might tip off some warning bells for Aleko.
Okay. And Aleko swings, and you see he has 2 Spell Stutter Sprites in his hand, so he's declining to cast the Preordain to set up the Delver with the hope of being able to counter a spell with Spell Stutter Sprite. Mm-hmm. And he that might be a regular counter spell, sort of blurry there, but the 4th card on the left
That looks like a Tempest counterspell.
Yeah, that's right. That's what that looks like. All right, so Jason has 2 mountains. That's not the start you're looking for with Kiln Fiend, because the deck has a lot of cantrips. You can see there's a Ponder. He also is running Preordains and Gushes. So 2 mountains does not get you very close to casting those.
Looks like he has a fistful of blue cards, including Delver Secrets, and I believe it's Jitaxian Pro. Maybe he's just holding on to it so that he could enable his Cyclopses and his Kiln Fiends. Looks like Aleko missed again on his Delver flip, but he's going to preordain and hopefully set one up this turn. He sees a land. Awkwardly with preordain, you have to draw at least one of the cards, which means that at least one card will be blank, and you have to keep both cards if you want to set up a Delver flip.
Yeah, I think by and large, if you see like land spell, you're still better off to push the land to the bottom. And it looks like that's what Aleko's doing.
Yeah.
This is a very low to the ground deck. You just don't need a lot of lands.
And RS Chrono in chat is disappointed that Aleko Pours betrayed the combo nation. Maybe that's why his Delver is protesting. He says, well, I'm not coming to work today.
Oh, it looks like Aleko chose to draw a land. So he's going to have access to Spell Stutter Sprite and Counterspell next turn.
Now, do you think Aleko knows what's up? All he's seen so far are basic mountains and a Jataxian Probe. Fortunately, this is Pauper. No Ball Lightning is going to be crashing through.
Yeah, I think if he's got a lot of experience with Pauper, he would see that mountains plus Gitaxian Probe is most likely going to be Blue-Red Cyclops.
So here he flashes in a Spell Stutter Sprite for no value, because it has a trigger that could counter something potentially, but wasn't useful. But here's where the value comes in. After attacking with the Spell Stutter Sprite and having it not be blocked, he puts in a Ninja of the Deep Hours via the Ninjutsu mechanic.
Yep. All right, and Jason scoops it up. I mean, Ninja, it's only a 2/2, but a lot of times if you can get any kind of draw engine going on with the Mono Blue Delver, you can just have more counterspells than they have threats in their deck.
Yeah. Chug Chief, Aleko was being polite, revealed his hand because his opponent had Jataxian probed him. You're not obligated to play face up, but your opponent does have the ability to just write down the contents of your hand after casting something like a Jataxian probe or a discard effect.
Yeah, so if they're playing, you can take the time to write down the hand, or I can leave it face up. It's sort of, it's preference.
Yeah. And then we're going to go into the sideboard. Why don't you start off discussing the contents of Jason's sideboard?
Okay, so Jason has 3 Stormbound Geist, 1 Dispel, 1 Negate, 2 Hydroblast, 3 Pyroblast, 2 Flame Slash, 1 Flaring Pain, and 2 Electrickery. So I would anticipate he's going to potentially bring in the Stormbound Geist, since what you're trying to do is like shut down the flyers of the Mono Blue deck. And depending on how he plays it out, he's definitely going to bring in the Pyroblast, but he might bring in Dispel, Flame Slash, and Negate. I think if you're playing the Blue-Red Kiln Fiend list, there's a threat of kind of disrupting what your deck is doing. It almost plays out a bit like a combo deck, sort of like Infectas in Modern or Legacy. So you don't want to like reduce what your deck is doing too much, or otherwise you can find yourself not being able to combo them out.
Yeah, and then on Aleko's side, what does he have to work with?
So he's got 2 Stormbound Geist as well. He's got 2 Thornwind Fairies, which I'm pretty sure is a fairy that you can tap to do 1 damage. He's got 2 Annul, 3 Hydroblast, 2 Cursive Chain, 2 Coral Net, 1 Dispel, and 1 Exclude. So his deck is already like very, very consistent in terms of what it does pre-board. So I would expect him to bring in probably the Hydroblast, because both the Kiln Fiend and the Cyclops are red. Potentially the Cursive Chains, although Jason's going to have access to Apostle's Blessing, which can force the curses to fall off. And that's probably it. The Stormbound Geist and the Thornwind Fairies aren't great because Jason's primary threats are not flyers or creatures with 1 toughness. And then I guess I would expect the Dispel to come in.
Yeah, the Dispel has quite a few targets in this matchup. Dispel, it's a Worldwide common, as are many cards in terms of rarity in this format. It counters target instants, though. Very elegant design.
Yeah, and interesting, for the UR Kiln Fiend list, you can get your spell countered, but you still get the pump effect on your Kiln Fiend. So if Aleko brings in the Dispel, he's really going to make sure he's going to save it for cards that either give, like Temur Battle Rage, that give Trample, or else for Apostle's Blessing, which is going to let it attack through his mono blue deck.
Yes, Kiln Fiend, just for reference, it triggers anytime you cast an instant or sorcery spell. Gets pretty big pretty quickly. Let's see if the players are back at their matches.
Yeah, it looks like Aleko has presented, and Jason is still shuffling. And to note, last game, it looks like Jason mulliganed down to 6 cards and then kept that hand with just mountains. So hopefully he gets a little better of a hand this time around, and we get to see some interaction gameplay. Although one of the strengths of the Cyclops deck is that you don't really want to interact with your opponent. You just want to attack them for 20.
Yeah. That deck can potentially kill on turn 3, right? Maybe even turn 2 is not really possible.
Turn 3 is the earliest they can kill you because the Delver of Secrets is not able to get a lot of power and toughness boosts.
And Jason looks like he's on a completely different deck now. Basic Island into Delver of Secrets. Did he just make a transformational board? We may never know. At least Aleko wouldn't. We do have the contents of the sideboard. You guys know what's in the sideboard. You know what's up.
All right, let's see if we get a flip here.
These guys are playing Delver of Secrets, but Merfolk of the Pearl Trident is legal in Pauper, and it's
Yep.
it can even get boosted by Merfolk Lord, so I don't know why they're just playing that instead.
Yeah, Delver is a little bit weaker in Pauper because you don't see as many Brainstorms because there's not fetch lands.
Yeah.
So here Jason plays an Evolving Wild, which is one of the fetch lands that gets played, but a lot of decks like Aleko's deck is not playing any fetch lands because a land coming into play tapped is too big of a liability.
But that being said, it looks like main deck for Jason, he has 29 instants and sorcery, so nearly half his deck will flip Delver of Secrets. He's gotten a little bit unlucky.
Well, or he's missed one time. If he gets it next time.
Cut all
he's
his
exactly
instants and sorcery
lucky.
and put in random stuff instead. Aleko similarly has he's a little bit heavier on the creature plans. He got 22 instants and sorceries that could potentially flip his Delver. So not surprising he missed a few times, but he still got game 1 nonetheless.
Yeah. And really for the mono blue Delver list, it's sometimes less relevant to flip your Delvers immediately and more to set up a counter wall. So if you see some ninjas off a ponder and you don't see spells to flip Delver, you're going to keep it anyways. All right, so Jason pondered, chose not to shuffle. I'm guessing he probably drew a Delver and left the Pyroblast on top of his deck to flip Delver and also potentially kill one of Aleko's creatures or spells. All right, Aleko leads with another Preordain. It looks like he has at least one land in his hand, so we'll see if he chooses to keep the island. And it does, I think, choose to draw the island. We got this text files window coming up in front of me. All right, so Jason says trigger and reveals Pyroblast. Delver flips.
Flip in, and that's gonna triple the clock, almost.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, there are enough protection spells in the blue-red Cyclops list that sometimes you can just ride a Delver to, a 6-turn clock, depending on if you can find a pump spell as well.
The cards are different. The power level is slightly different, but unless you're playing Two-Headed Giant or Commander, you start at 20 life, none the same, and the 3/2 is just as potent.
Interestingly, I didn't see this before, but Aleko's Delver list has 3 Dazes and only 1 Deprive. So Daze is actually not super commonly played in the mono blue deck. So we'll see whether or not that becomes relevant, because it would sort of be like a gotcha.
I'm a little bit surprised about the Deprive. I don't know if that's very common in Pauper formats. However, Aleko's deck is mono islands, so there aren't any lands with beneficial come into play effects that can benefit from a Deprive.
So the mono blue Delver lists a lot of times run 4. They run 4 counterspell because that card's great, and then they can run 2 to 4 either Deprives or Logic Knots, which essentially is another 2-mana counterspell without significant downside. I would think like the average CMC of Aleko's deck is like 1.2 if you include the Infinities and the Gushes. All right, so goes back to Jason, still having a bit of a hard time seeing what's going on here. It looks like he has no creatures, but I can't tell. All right, so here's another Delver, which we saw off the ponder earlier, and an Electrickery for Aleko's Delver, and another Delver. So interesting, he chose to cast his own Delver into a potential Daze in order to play around Daze on the Electrickery. So it kind of tells you how Jason's strategizing this matchup. All right, here come the 1/1s. All right, so I find that when you play into mono blue, if they're just holding up a lot of mana, you just kind of want to pass. As you can see in Aleko's hand, he has a counterspell, a gush, a ninja, and an island. So not really anything to do proactively on his kind of main phase here. We'll see if he floats 2 to cast a gush. He does. All right, so Aleko's going to draw 2 cards, floating 2 blue mana. And he draws a Spell Stutter Sprite, and looks like another island. So just cast Spell Stutter Sprite with the 2 floating mana. And he played an island before casting his gush.
Yeah.
All right.
Looks like right now, because Aleko is potentially facing down 6 damage next turn in the form of Delver Secrets, he just really needs to get a body out there.
Yep. Well, and he really wants to turn on that ninja too, because
Oh yeah.
right now he is not able to kind of execute the game plan of mono blue, which is to just get a bunch of counter spells and be winning on board.
Yep.
All right, and this impulse looks like it's seeing a gush, a probe, potentially a lightning bolt, and a pyroblast. So just all hits. I think if he could trade in his hand for these 4 cards, he'd do it.
Yeah, no, totally makes sense.
And it looks like he took the gush. All right, so kind of a change in strategy here. He chooses not to take one of the removal spells and instead take a card draw. You can see he already has a Pyroblast in hand, and Aleko's only representing 1 counterspell with just 2 mana up. All right, here come the Delvers. All right, Jason puts Preordain into his hand, and I would anticipate seeing an attack for 6. There you go. Aleko goes down to 8. And see a Preordain. Looks like he's looking at, looks like a mountain and another Evolving Wilds. We'll see if he takes either of those lands. He does not. Both lands to the bottom, draws a random card. Yeah, interesting. He drew an island, but in situations like this where you don't have another land in play, Gush kind of acts like, you know, sort of a ramp spell, because you can float mana and then replay one of your islands. All right, so here's a Killing Fiend, and into Counterspell. All right, so it looks like Aleko's going to get to turn on his ninja if he chooses to, but he won't be able to hold up additional counter magic. So
Yeah.
He's gonna take the swing back unless he draws something like a Vapor Snag.
The counterspell he drew, normally a good card, but when you're facing down behind on tempo, reactive cards like counterspell is not where you want to be.
Yeah, and Aleko's not actually running Vapor Snag, so he's looking for some snaps to get those Delvers off the board. Mm-hmm. All right. So if I'm Jason here, I'm casting my spell's main phase to play around any potential counter magic. So he does. He plays a Gush, floating 2 mana, I presume. Alright, he casts a Preordain. And I think that even though we know Aleko's not holding something like a Dispel, Jason's probably digging for some way to ensure that the ninja gets off the board and he has counter backup. Alright, so he's looking at a Pyroblast and one other. Looks like a Dispel, actually, so kind of what he wants. Yeah, puts both on top. Draws the Dispel. I believe he's still floating a blue mana, so I would expect to see the Pyroblast fired off now. Nope, just decides to let it go. Puts Aleko down to 2. Maybe he's just not going to worry about the ninja and just say, you know, you have to land a flyer to beat me. Yeah, it looks like it. I like that play a lot from Jason. Just say, like, the cards that beats me are a flyer. If you can resolve one, you might slow me down. So I'm just not going to let that happen. All right. Here comes, I think it's Spire Golem. Yeah, Spider Golem. So it's a 6 mana, 2/4 flyer with affinity for islands. And so you can see, like I was 4 islands, you get to play a 2/4 flyer for 2 mana.
That's value.
Pretty good. All right, so Jason's saying, well, I still have lethal, so what you got? And he's got a surprise blocker, which runs into a Pyroblast. And Leko scoops him up.
That's gonna knot things up at 1 apiece. We're gonna go into the rubber third game. I don't know if anything necessarily changes in the sideboard for these players.
Sometimes there's some consideration of changing up your play on the player draw,
Yeah.
just in terms of like kind of raising or lowering your converted mana costs. It looks
Yeah.
like Aleko might have brought in the Coral Nets, which I can't remember what that does, but it might tap down a red or green creature. So that card's also pretty good.
Yeah, Coronet, a pretty interesting card in this format.
So green or white creature. Okay, so maybe I was looking at his sideboard because that does not make a lot of sense to bring in against blue-red Delver. All right. So it looked like both players decided like you would expect them to. So I wouldn't anticipate any changes unless, you know, Leko says, I'm on the play now, I can bring in and exclude, but 3 mana is too much on the draw.
Yeah, it's the cantrip ability is nice, but just on the draw, it's a little bit clunky.
Yeah.
He is on the play. He's going to likely be on the play this game if he elects to do so. Hey, Mackie, thanks for pointing out the title does say Legacy on the Twitch stream. We're going to get that fixed when our spotter gets a chance. But this is, in fact, Pauper, the Rags and Riches 4 at Card Kingdom. As far as I know, this is the only store that actually runs big Pauper events in paper with sizable price support. So it's pretty exciting. I love Legacy. It's my favorite format, but I think it's really exciting to see a lot of Pauper, and hopefully you're as excited as we are.
Do you know what the prize pool is for this tournament?
Yeah, it ranges. Payout goes to top 8. It's a $15 entry fee. I think first gets a Snapcaster Mage, a Jace Prince Prodigy, a Sword of Fire and Ice, and a Sword of Light and Shadow.
Wow, that's all for first?
Yeah.
Wow.
Second gets the same thing except without the Jace Prince Prodigy.
Okay.
Third and fourth both get a Sword of Fire and Ice and a Sword of Light and Shadow.
Wow.
Fifth through eighth gets a Sword of Light and Shadow. Unfortunately, none of these are legal in Pauper.
Yeah, I think this tournament was originally sort of conceptualized as a way to transition into Modern by building a Pauper deck. You know,
Yeah.
because you can buy a Pauper deck for $20 to $40, and you know, if it's got Ponders and Brainstorms, you can kind of transition that into a few different decks. And yeah, then before you know it, you win a tournament and you're, you know, partially into Modern.
Yeah. The only really expensive card in Pauper is Oubliette. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's a nightmare. 3 black mana, turns on devotion, 2 black. It turns on devotion like a
1
chip
black.
and is removal. I'm just botching this left and right. It's too expensive for me to actually notice. But,
So it basically works like Oblivion Ring, except for when it goes away, the creature comes back into play tapped. That's what that wall of text says.
Yep. These interestingly templated old cards. They evoke a lot of nostalgia. They look really cool, but they often don't really help you figure out what's going on.
They do not. All right, looks like Aleko's ready to go. Guy's a fast shuffler.
Yep. And these guys are headed into the rubber game with Jason likely taking the play. No, Aleko taking the play.
Look, they both mulled down to 6. Jason's first hand had everything he wanted except for any lands,
Okay.
so not quite everything. And
Yep.
Aleko's hand, you know, I think you probably keep this, and he does. He's got 2 Hydroblasts and a counter spell, so his hand's not going to be good if Jason's hand looks like last game where he draws all Delvers, but against the Kiln Fiend and Cyclops hands, it's pretty decent.
Oh yeah.
All right, so here,
Basic Island likely spells that his clock is not red in nature, but he's going to lead with a Ponder. Ponder, a lot of arts. It's a very powerful card in Eternal format. What's your favorite version?
I like the Lorwyn one the most with the Merfolk hanging out.
Oh, you like the Merfolk? Yeah, that's the original one I usually gravitate towards though, but I think there's just something really special about the art for the core sets with the 3 different globes. That is, in fact, what Jason elected to play, and I think it looks really nice.
Some of my favorite altars are with this version of Ponder. I've seen ones that have like Marvel comic book heroes as each of the globes, or things like that. So
Yeah.
a lot more to do with it. I just tend to like original arts a lot.
Now, this matchup between two very aggressive decks is getting off to a little bit of a slow start. A lot of draw goal action right here. I think whoever has like a flash creature, which probably is only present in Leko's deck, in the form of a Spell Stutter Sprite, that's very good. Looks like he flashed it in for no value, except for the ninjutsu mechanic in combination with Ninja of the Deep Hours. That's going to give him some cards. But Jason has Hydroblast to counter, and
These sweet
this
battles.
is a really interesting stack interaction. Is that a negate that just took care of the Hydroblast targeting the Pyroblast?
No, yeah, so Jason targeted the ninja with a Pyroblast, Aleko responded with a Hydroblast, and then Jason responded with Dispel.
Oh, well, that was a Dispel. That's right.
Yeah. So I expect to see a Cyclops come down. And if this Cyclops isn't answered by Aleko this turn, Jason has 2 Apostle's Blessings in his hand, which is going to be able to give it protection from the color of his choice and or artifacts. I can't remember if it's and or. But yeah, it'll be very difficult to get off the board if he doesn't get it right now. Although Aleko does have the tools for it. He has a couple of snaps in hand, which is return target creature to its owner's hand and then untap 2 lands. There was a time when people thought that was very fair, just getting free spells.
Yep. And this Nivix Cyclops does not trigger this turn. It looks like Jason doesn't have any instants or sorcery this turn, or he would have probably played them. Maybe he's holding on to reactive spells.
Yeah, he has kind of a grip full of protection and reactive spells. It looks like he also has a gut shot, so I was surprised to see him not kill the Spell Stutter Sprite. But the Cyclops does have Defender, so it can't attack unless you cast a spell.
So we're going to have a Spire Golem hitting the battlefield. This is excellent because with 4 toughness and 2 power, it's going to be able to trade with the Nivix Golem if it stays on the battlefield and the Nivix Golem is triggered in a way that allows it to attack.
And honestly, these are like my favorite games with the Cyclops list, especially from the opposing side, because you're just like, okay, there's something that can just kill you at any time on the other side of the field, and you're just trying to figure out all the ways, like, okay, do I kill it after he casts some spells, or do I just do it now so that he doesn't have a chance to protect it? Because if you lose the counter battle while the Cyclops is attacking, all of a sudden the Cyclops is 15 power.
Yeah. An interesting interaction that comes up often in older formats with larger card pools, cards like Young Pyromancer or Monastery Mentor, cards like Hydroblast and Pyroblast, they actually can target any spell or permanent. It only has an effect if it's blue upon resolution. But with cards like Kiln Fiend and Nivix Cyclops, if you just want the trigger, go ahead and cast in whatever you want, a land.
Yeah, and even if it didn't in this case, Jason could always target his own Cyclops and then give it protection from red, and that's still 2 spells. Unlikely. All right, so Jason's going to pull the trigger first here and cast Apostle's Blessing on the Cyclops, giving it protection from, I'm assuming artifacts, but I cannot remember how that card is worded. Yeah, it looks like artifacts.
Yeah, Apostle's Blessing allows you to choose a color or artifact. Spire Golem being on the battlefield, artifacts is the most appropriate card to name. Potentially blue to play around removal of some sort, most likely bounce given the color pie restrictions of the blue color.
Yep. So the Cyclops, they're kind of doing like a bit of a storm counter thing going on here, but currently it's a 4/4. There we go.
Or 4/1, right?
No, 4/4. It starts as a 1/4.
Okay.
It's a very hardy defender.
Oh, I got it confused with Calcite Snapper. Yeah, sorry. 4/4.
Yeah. All right, and then here comes, it looks like he's just going to go for the Temur Battle Rage. And this is going to make the Cyclops a 8/4 double striking trampler.
Yep. With protection from artifacts.
Yep, and it no longer has defender. Okay, so this is where it gets real interesting, right? So Aleko has the opportunity to cast Snap or Counterspell. If he gets countered back, then the Cyclops is going to be able to lethal him.
Yeah, the +3/+0 from the trigger in conjunction with the double strike, and the fact that it's unblockable this turn by that Spire Golem
Right.
is a scary clock.
And if he does nothing, then Jason can still attack him, but only for 16. But if he has a free spell like a Mutagenic Growth or a Gut Shot, then Jason might still be able to get him with protection. So
Yeah.
he's really in a tough spot here. Although, looking at how this is going to play out, I'm guessing that even if Aleko, no matter what Aleko chooses, Jason kind of has it all. He's going to Gut Shot him and still have a second Apostle's Blessing.
Yeah.
So
If I'm Aleko, I think about it really hard, and I really don't want to go down to 4. I think it's worth the risk to fight back with the possibility of going to lethal if Jason has a counterspell. I don't think you're winning, though, if you fall down to 4 and still facing down this clock. I think I like leading off with Snap because you're losing the counterspell effects either way, but Snap allows you to untap and potentially do something else if there's some other weird effect that you need to play around.
yeah, I think if I'm in a Aleko spot, I think maybe the play was to bounce the Cyclops a couple of turns ago when Jason was tapped out, because the Cyclops deck is not able to run a ton of counterspells because they're not proactive enough to pump their creatures. But man, they have a ton of protection spells.
Yeah. So that was a Gut Shot to Aleko.
Yep.
Gut Shot, Phyrexian Mechanic, deals 1 damage to target creature or player. A little bit weird to see him paying Phyrexian mana just to deal 1 damage, but in conjunction with the Nivix Cyclops, that's actually 4 damage. Ooh, and then
All
here
right,
we
and
have
here's Pro Blue.
Apostle's Blessing for the blowout.
So how does 13-4 double striking trample can't be blocked by artifacts feel?
And it feels like that's enough to take the game.
That feels like a match.
All right, so that's going to wrap up things up in favor of Jason Schumacher. We got about 18 minutes left. Should I see if I grab Jason for a winner's interview? Feel free to talk to him a little bit and see if we can find a backup feature match.
Sure.
Yeah, let's see if we can get things done. Okay, so here, coming back to the booth. And I'm Sean Yu, joined by Zach Onimus. We just saw some really exciting, aggressive magic between Jason Schumacher and Aleko Pors. Very aggressive finish, 26-point attack or so from Jason in the last turn. Wow.
With 1 gut shot point.
Yeah. Well, let's see if we could grab him right now while players are de-sideboarding, or after players finish the sideboarding.
Okay.
And see if he gets some thoughts on that matchup. We'll be right back. You can put on the coupon whatever.
Put on what?
Coupon. Yep.
All right, and we're back in the booth with the winner of the first round match, Jason. So that was a pretty tight match. I mean, you kind of had this like back and forth where, you know, he had a grip full of counter magic and bounce spells, and you had a grip full of protection.
Yeah, I think that. Well, so the caveat here is this is the first tournament I've played with Delver,
Okay.
or with Kiln Fiend. This is the first tournament I've played with Popper, so the insight I have is not all that great here. But like, I know that he's playing the game. He's playing a tempo match, right? Like, I'm trying to combo him off when he has his pants down. And so what I have to do is I have to make sure that he ends up overcommitting at one point or another, or that I'm able to just overwhelm him with Delvers that end up being flipped, and that I can end up blowing him out if he ends up choosing to go all in on something.
Okay.
So I like the matchup, but I also am new to this format, so I'm more hesitant about playing it than anything else.
Yeah, so that's a big thing about the Kiln Fiend list
Yeah.
is when you go for it, you go all in.
Right.
So what kind of helped you make the determination on that last turn to go for it?
So the last turn, I started with Apostle's Blessing by virtue of that's a very low risk of way for me to be able to start the combo and to see if he wants to end up doing anything. I'm able to back off and I'm able to go kind of halvesies in if he ends up countering the Battle Rage before I enter my attack step.
Okay.
And then once the Battle Rage ends up resolving, I have enough backup and I can end up gut-shotting. I can either choose to gut-shot Spellstarter Sprite when it comes down, since he's already shown that he has that, or I can end up holding up for another Apostle's Blessing if he has Snap or if he has Vapor Snag.
Okay, so you sort of had like the test spell, and then once the test spell went through, you knew like
Yes.
you had enough to present lethal and protect it.
And Battle Rage is, I mean, obviously the most important card there. If he counters Battle Rage, I don't have a great attack step there. But with that said, I'm not dead on the board. Like, it's
Right.
worth testing the waters to see what's out there with Battle Rage there. I mean, one of the things that's tough about the Kiln Fiend deck is you have to be gutsy. Like, you're never going to have a 100% chance. You're never going to get them when they're entirely tapped down, because tapped down still means that they can daze you or something like that.
Sure.
So you have to choose, like, you have to be aggressive about choosing. If you end up thinking that you have a 60-70% chance of comboing off, then like those are good odds. I'll take those odds.
So if anybody's at home and they're kind of looking at Pauper, what kind of made your decision to choose Kiln Fiend as a list?
Because it looks sweet.
Yeah.
More than anything else, it looks like a sweet deck. It can do incredible things. It's capable of a turn 3 kill, and it looks awesome. And I think that fewer people are going to expect it and be metagaming for it than something like Mono Blue Delver.
Okay.
So it doesn't get blown out by Witches out of Mono Black. I mean, the Mono Black matchup is atrocious anyway, but it's a little bit less played, I think, based off of the online stats
Okay.
than a bunch of the common decks.
Okay. And Mono Black is bad just because they run so many of the edicts?
Edicts are terrible for you. So
Okay.
out of the board, you end up having Stormbound Geist and things like that. But game one is basically unwinnable unless you're able to land early threats and then end up protecting them.
Okay. So you're hoping to dodge Mono Black. It
Yep.
looked like Delver was pretty good for you. At least you guys are playing a pretty even game.
Absolutely.
What do you like? If you could sit down against any deck for the rest of the tournament, what would you pick?
I'll sit down against Tron.
Okay.
Tron doesn't play Disruption. Out of the board, it gets COP red, but I have answers to that out of the board, and so I'm just looking forward to being able to try to turn 3 kill or turn 4 kill someone. Yeah.
Okay. Well, excellent. It looks like Sean's about to come back in the booth, and we're going to get another match, hopefully. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. Good luck.
Thanks.